Yeah, that is a 2-minute opener of Helix. That is off their White Lace and Black Leather album. And as their second studio album that they did is an indie artist. And I've got joining me from London, Ontario tonight, the man, the legend, Mr. Brian Vollmer. Brian, how are you tonight?
Nice to be here.
It's nice to have you, man. It's been, you've been busy.
Been really busy putting together scrapbooks of all the photographs I have in my basement, trying to organize that stuff and getting ready for the 50th anniversary of the band next year. It's 40th anniversary of the release of Walking the Razor's Edge. We got the release of White Lace and Black Leather coming out on Indie TUNZ. And next week we leave for Cranbrook, British Columbia, and also Vancouver for dates with the Headpins and our old friend Kim Mitchell.
So next year, officially next year, Helix is 50 years old.
Yep.
Wow, a half century.
Baby.
A half century of music, and great rock music to boot, and more yet to come. You've got you have your own solo album that we're putting out soon.
Yes, it's a pleasure doing business, which is a turnaround of it's a business doing pleasure, which was the album Helix released in 1993, which is this album, but which was supposed to be my solo album, which is all totally confusing, but it's coming out as a Vollmer album on vinyl with 2 new tracks. Hungover, but still hanging in, and still get that look in your eyes.
Yeah, you've got some great music coming out, and you know, we've already released White Lace and Black Leather on the Indie TUNZ website. It's up there for people to listen to. It's up there for people to download. We've got some bonus tracks that are actually going to be accompanying that album. You sent me, I think three tracks we're looking at doing as bonus tracks on that.
Yes.
And we're looking at potentially releasing a couple of digital singles off that, and we were talking about that this afternoon.
Well, those 3 tracks you're referring to were actually recorded in Tom Chamuth's basement while we were trying to get our deal with Capitol Records in 1983. And it's When the Fire is Hot, which was never been released, except in Europe, I think, when they released the first two indie albums. And it was sang by Brent and written by Brent. And then the versions of White Lace and Black Leather and Check Out the Love. And those were all on a quarter-inch tape. And I had to go up to Goderich, Ontario with Siegfried Meyer at I think his Beach Studios. And I had to thermally bake the tape, which means you put them in a machine that kind of looks like a microwave, and they got to sit there for 24 hours. So I think the magnesium or something on the tape adheres back to the tape properly, because over time, because the tapes become gummed up, you can't play them, so you have to bake them. So as soon as they come out of that oven, though, they have to switch it right over to digital, and then the tape's no good after that.
So you get like one crack at being able to take that tape and convert it to digital.
Actually, you usually get two good runs at it. But after that,
Wow,
tape's
that's
no
crazy.
good, and it
Now
costs
you
$250 a tape. So
and you recorded this some of those tracks. Whose basement was that?
Tom Chamuth, who produced the first two albums.
And there was a unique process on how you guys recorded in his basement, wasn't there?
Well, at that time, it was at Tom's house. So we were recording in the basement, and Tom had run the cables up into his living room. So he couldn't see us, and there was no talk back and nothing at his house. So he'd start the recording machine upstairs, and then he'd run to the head of the stairs, and he'd yell down. He'd go, "Okay, tape's rolling." We count the song in, and off we go. And that's how these songs were recorded back in 1983. And
And
even
that's
these songs were instrumental in securing our deal with Capital EMI. And we were never signed to the Canadian label. We were always signed to the American label with worldwide distribution.
that's some pretty high tech recording, man.
It
I mean,
sounds.
that's
I think a part of Check Out the Love, that tape, we actually had to do a splice and take part of that tape and add it on to the one we did at Phase One later on. And
right.
that's the version that came out at No Rest of the Wicked. And I believe if you listen really close, you can hear where the splice is. There's a little.
Right. I'm listening to a couple of tracks. Now, was it you that was telling me about the editing process where he could actually shave some of the film off the tape using a razor blade? Was it you that told me about that?
I don't know about that.
Somebody was telling me years ago when they used to have to edit tape.
Oh, when
There
they
was
edit the tape, they used to, what they do is they draw the 2-inch tape across the heads. And then they get it, they could tell by moving the tape back and forth exactly, kind of when you do it when you're editing on Adobe Premiere Pro or something like that. Now you can actually move it back and forth and make out the syllable or the talking, so you can do a real precise edit. But they used to actually move the tape over the heads until they knew exactly where the splice was, and then they'd mark it with a white chalk pencil, and they'd pull the tape out and they'd really splice with the razor blade, and then they'd splice it back together with tape. I remember one morning we were working at the Phase One Studios, and this is a funny story, and I had stayed overnight at Jack Richardson's place in Toronto because Garth, his son, was working on our album as an engineer at Phase One Studio. So I stayed overnight at Jack Richardson's house. And in the morning, we go to the studio, and Garth goes and sparks up a great big joint and smokes this joint. Well, I think he got pretty high. And we go in the studio, and he had to do a tape splice. And so we do this tape splice, and we listen back to him. It's in the wrong spot. Well, then he starts getting paranoid because he's high, right? So he goes in and does another splice, and it's wrong. And it just kept getting worse and worse. Well, luckily back then we did safeties and stuff, right? But and as you know, Garth went on to be a famous producer. Uh,
Right.
9 Inch Nails, I think, and all sorts of people like that. So he was a famous producer in his own right. As everyone knows, his father Jack was a producer for well, everybody from Bob Seger, Alice Cooper, of course, to Guess Who.
Right.
Uh, one of the
So how
greatest.
did they end up getting the splice right on this tape?
Excuse me.
How did they end up getting the splice right on the tape?
Well, I don't think he did. I think he went to the safety. Like that, whenever back then in the studio you did a recording, you
Right.
had to have a 2 inch tape for like the real version, but then you always had a backup tape in case,
Right.
chewed and, so
In case the producer smokes weed and gets high.
yeah, in case well, he wasn't a producer, he was the engineer.
Engineer gets high. I guess that's not a good idea with tape. It's not necessarily a good idea with digital either because you can still make mistakes.
What, nowadays?
Yeah. I mean, you can correct them a lot easier because you got a little more remakes.
I think it's a lot harder to do mistakes nowadays. Like back then, like, once you chopped into the physical tape,
Yeah, you're like
yeah,
you're
safety,
in
but
deep. You're
screw
in
yeah,
deep when you're doing that.
you didn't get any more shots at the. Wasn't like
It-
3 strikes you're out. You had 2 strikes
it-
you were.
there's a couple of tracks on there. I mean, I don't know if you were able to hear the tracks that I played. It's a mashup of the 9 tracks that are on the current release, and there's a couple of tunes in there. When I close my eyes and listen to your voice, uh, 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 I hear Meatloaf.
No, it's a compliment. I like Meatloaf's voice.
I hear his I hear some of his I don't know vocal in there in a couple of the tunes there. I
Well,
think
I do have a whiskey throated type of texture to my voice. I think that's partially because I wrecked my voice. But Meatloaf, we played with him in the Rainbow Theater in Denver, Colorado,
oh wow
in 1983, I believe it was. And the thing I remember most about that day wasn't playing with Meatloaf so much, although I do have pictures of that. It was more Kenny Haig, our sound man slash road manager. Kenny was a little English guy, long, long, curly black hair, right? And he was setting up in the afternoon. He went and reached across they had like out front, like a confectionery stand. There was nobody there though, right? And they had like pop, with the pop dispensers. And he went to lean across to get a pop, and there was a fly sticker, and it had to be like, where's my finger here, right? It had to be like that friggin' wide, like 6 inches wide, and it fell and his head on his hair, right? And when he pulled it off, it was literally glue like this. And he spent the whole afternoon. He thought he was going to have to shave all his hair off there, putting Varsol and paint thinner in his friggin' hair.
oh
And,
man
both Brent and Paul went backstage and got pictures of Meatloaf that night. And
right
it's funny you mention the pictures because we're probably going to try to put together a coffee table,
right
hardcover book for the 50th. That was one of my ideas. And
right
take some of these pictures that we have and put them in a hardcover book.
okay. Yeah, anyways, there were a couple of those tunes in there. When I heard the second part of the chorus, I'm like, that's almost like a vocal lick the way Meatloaf would have sang those notes. It's kind of cool. And that's your operatic training coming through there too.
I don't know.
I think so.
We wrote songs with a different reason for behind each melody and each song. I don't know if we had to do. I think the way I produced my voice after a while
Right.
was, because I had throat problems earlier in my career. I was sent for voice training, right?
Right.
So I had already been in choirs in high school with Jerry Fagan, who's a pretty famous regional choir conductor. And so when I started studying with Ed, he was a classical singer too, right? So I did kind of get the classical sounds, but that first album actually I sang before I ever went to Ed. So it was more, if I was singing like that, it was probably because that's from being choirs maybe in high school, but it wasn't really from operatic training or anything like that.
From any training. But the thing is, there's aside from training, there's a tonal quality about your voice even before you did that formal training.
Yes, I would say that. Like my voice kind of has a unique sound to it.
Yeah. Yeah, and you sing in tune. I mean
It's
I mean
identifiable, right? And that's one thing about singers, right? You can not have the greatest range in the world or whatever, but if your voice stands out, that's everything.
well, that was a worrisome time for you though, because when you hurt your voice, you actually did develop vocal nodes, did you not?
Heavy, heavy. I was told I'd never sing again, and
Right. I mean, that's terrible for a singer in a band to hear that.
that usually is the end. But in my case, my manager, William Sipe, had already been going for vocal lessons to Edward Johnson when he was in Poverty Train and the Great Rufus Road Machine, because a lot of bands down at Graham Booking Agency, like Major Hoople's Boarding House and Copper Penny, they
Right.
were going there, and bands back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, they were singing 3 to 5 sets a night, 6, 7 nights a week. So everybody was losing their voice.
Right.
And Ed was the only guy that sang bel canto, bel voce, beautiful voice, which was the old Italian method of
There was
singing.
a lot of wisdom that Bill Sipe passed along to you as your manager.
Without Bill Sipe, I wouldn't be who I am today. Bill Sipe was the brains behind the operation as far as I was concerned. Um, it takes a strong willed personality to be able to be a manager of a rock band because by its definition, rock people aren't just usually disciplined, you know.
No, they're usually free-spirited people that don't want to be tied down to
It's
anything.
not trying to herd cats. It's a difficult job, and I look back at Bill trying to get us to do certain things, and it was difficult. He was smart, and he knew how to take 5 guys that had minimal talent, really, in the grand scheme of things, and mold us. Like he was the person that got us to go for lessons and got us to improve as musicians, and who would critique us constantly on uh, how to perform and what we were doing which was right and what was wrong. He had the eye for it, and he knew what we needed to do to achieve success.
He almost had that same approach to managing, I think, that Doc did with Kiss.
Well, I don't know what Doc did with Kiss. I know Bill didn't get caught with 125 tons or whatever it was of pot.
Well, I know there was some crazy things that went on there, but I mean, he managed some pretty crazy bands. I mean, he managed Motley Crue and Kiss and a whole bunch of other bands on the road. He must have had his hands full.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, did Bill Sipe manage anybody besides you guys?
I managed, well, Eric Gillespie had Sire, but it was kind of all under the Bill Sipe umbrella. He had Ray
Right,
Lyle. Ray Lyle was very successful. It
right,
was Bill's two successful artists were Helix and Ray Lyle.
right. Well, that's a great legacy to have when you've got music that lives on many many years after you've been involved with the main project. Um,
Well,
you
the
know,
reason Bill had such a knowledge of what we needed to do was he had a business degree from Conestoga College, I believe. So he had that background. He was in the Great Rufus Road Machine, which was a show band, and Poverty Train, which was a rock band. And he worked as an agent at Dram. So he had all those different things kind of covered with his knowledge of the music business. And the fact that he was in Poverty Train, a rock band, a Great Rufus Road Machine, a show band, first off, you have to understand what those two bands meant. The rock band played the B circuit, and they played the heavier stuff like Cream and Jimi Hendrix, and wore jeans and bell bottoms and long hair, and
Right.
heavy basically. And the show bands, they all wore choreographed, uh, matching suits and stuff. They choreographed moves. They played only top 40 hits, right? It was a very, together, like worked out show, right?
And people will be able to find that information out in your book. You're writing a book about
Right.
all
That's
this.
right. That's what I talk about the golden age, and they play different clubs. Say a band like Major Hoople's Boarding House, which was kind of like in that, kind of classification. They play, say, there's and Sault Ste. Marie at the Water Tower, and the Crown Room at the Coronet, whereas we play the pit of the Coronet when we
Right.
started. We played like, where all Satan's Choice hung out, and there was fights every night, and the blue collar workers would go for a drink after putting in their shift at Snyder's Meats or whatever. They'd all end up in the pit of the Coronet, and that's where we played, the rough place. Rock bars were typically the rougher places, not the nicer places. They paid less for sure. Show bands got a lot more money, but but most musicians didn't want to be in show bands. They wanted to be in rock bands. So.
Well, maybe I can be a help with that. Maybe we'll have to talk about that sometime because I'd love to help you with your book because you're talking to a guy here who I don't look like it, and sometimes I don't talk like it. My wife even says I don't talk like it. Who got excelled in English literature 99%.
I majored in English.
Yeah, I loved it. I never liked English until I went back to school later. It was weird.
I
You
was an English major. I nearly went to universities majoring in English.
yeah, you gain appreciation for certain languages when you have an interest in them. But when I first went to high school, I wasn't interested in English. It was like, yeah, okay, whatever. So the English came
I always
later.
enjoyed reading. Even when I was young, I enjoyed reading. I read books. I devoured them when I was going to
Right,
school. I
right,
remember I got into Dr. Doolittle, for instance. I think it was like 24 friggin' books or something. Read them all, right?
right. We got a couple of hellos from out there. Sean McKenna of Barstools and Band Talk says, hey. And Jay Panasica was online, says, sup, boys, Studio 73 Digital Media in the house. I love it. There you go, Jay. There's
a lot of these projects.
we're gonna put a plug in for Studio 73 Digital Media. A great guy. Jay is a really nice guy. He's a friend of yours as well.
Well, Jay's a webmaster, and Jay went with me out to British Columbia, and we filmed the interviews for the book. And then after that, we went to Manitoba. A couple
Right.
weeks ago, we did Souvlaki Bill from the guy who
Right.
used to run the gasworks. And we went to Bill's house, and we interviewed him.
Oh,
Right?
wow.
So he was telling some great stories about the gasworks and about Michael White, for instance. And
Right.
Getty Lee still phones me at Christmas time, and tomorrow we're going out for supper.
And Gasworks was like
Hey, we're going out for supper.
Gasworks was like the venue to play, right?
Excuse me?
Gasworks was the place to play, right?
I still didn't hear what you said.
Gasworks.
Oh, the gasworks. Yes, yes.
Yeah. It was the
Well,
place to play.
We started off at the Nickelodeon.
Right.
It's just down from the Eaton Center.
Right.
And I hated playing there. Like Martha was the old woman that used to run it. She was a Presbyterian minister, a Lutheran minister, or something in her spare time. And anyway, we played one set there. She came up and said, "You're fired. Too loud." Well, we didn't know it, being green and inexperienced, but she did that with every band that first played her club. So of course she got us on the phone. We had to phone our manager and say we just got fired. And then he had to get on and beg Martha to let us stay. And We had to go over and ask Martha after every set if it was too loud. Oh my God. And I didn't really like playing Toronto because Toronto was a very transient audience. You could never get like, you know, we play a lot of these smaller towns that, you play there, you come back 6 months later, you're playing to the same people, only more people, hopefully, right? But when
Right.
you play Toronto, it was never ever the same people when you came back, except the gasworks, because the gasworks wasn't where Torontonians went. The gasworks was where all the out of towners went. That's what they don't
Yeah.
tell.
It was an out of towners bar.
Yeah, like if,
Yeah.
if if you were coming to town to rock, you went to the gasworks. You didn't go to
Yeah.
the Queensberry Arms or Spats or the Tube or the Blackhawk Inn, and usually you went to the gasworks. It was like meat market, uh, lots of scantily clad, horny-looking chicks. That's not the most wokest thing to say nowadays, but that's the way it was. A lot of these places, it's pre-AIDS and stuff like that. You don't talk about the promiscuity of the '80s, but believe me, there's a lot of it.
It was prevalent in the 70s too.
What?
I said it was prevalent in the 70s too.
Yeah, like you go to a bar. Well, yeah, you go to a bar, and the worst you could get would be like, venereal disease or herpes or venereal warts or something. I don't have any of those things, by the way. And but then it became, in the '90s, it was like it could kill you, which kind of
That's
put a
right. The
damper
world changed. The world definitely changed.
on the
And
world change, right? And little by little, things changed to extinguish the bar scene. Entertainment became much more varied. There was much more, many more different streams of entertainment. Everything from videos to cell phones to computers to you name it. Back when we started, remember they rolled up the sidewalks essentially at 11 o'clock. TV went off the air at, what was it, 12 o'clock?
exactly. Exactly.
There was
Not
no. I remember we had rotary phones,
not a
uh,
lot of choices for
or
entertainment.
there's no such thing as a cell phone. It sounds crazy to almost say that. I remember when Sipey was always in the gadgets, and the first cell phone I ever saw, Sipey got, and it was the size of a friggin' shoebox. And I think you had to wind it up too to get the battery. It was like a handle on the side of the thing, right? And I remember driving with him outside of Baden, Ontario. We drove like the highest hill, yeah, around
Yeah,
Baden, right? He got out, he's trying to get reception of this damn thing, right? I remember the first time I heard a Walkman, for God's sakes.
yeah,
He
that's
put the, head,
crazy.
he put the headphones on, and the music was so loud. I ripped them out of my head. I just looked around. I thought everybody because it was on a plane, right? And I thought everybody be like jumping up and down, like saying, "Turn that down," right? Everybody just kind of reading the magazines. Went, that's
Yeah.
very loud. How did that? And
Well,
I,
when you were playing Southwestern Ontario, when you guys were playing the circuit in Southwestern Ontario, what was your favorite city to play in?
what do you consider Southwestern Ontario?
Well, let's say from Windsor all the way up to Timmins.
No, I consider Southern Ontario everything south of Toronto.
Yeah, anything south of Toronto, sure.
London for sure. There's London at the Rideout. That was our favorite place to play. But like our hometown was Kitchener, so we're like playing Coronet.
Yeah, I
Uh,
mean, back in the day, London had some great bars. I mean, they had the Rideout, they had Mingles, Freifogels. They had a really active music scene back then.
I played Five Fogels. I played the Barn. I never played Mingles. Everybody tells me you played Mingles. I go, no, we didn't. Um, we played the Old City Hall with Ronnie Hawkins.
That was a great bar, the old City Hall.
I've seen some wild fights there too. We played
Oh,
several
man.
places out of St. Thomas. We played the John Scott. We played the Schooner. We played the Wheat Sheaves. Um, we played. Let me see. We played the Chooch out in Guelph. We played the Tudor Tavern in Cambridge. We
I was
played.
at a couple of those wild parties at the Schooner Inn.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, when the fight broke out and they dragged the cigarette machine down the street.
I remember that night.
I was
You know what? I remember that night because it looked like those old westerns. You know, where you see cars literally flying through the air and tables and chairs. That's what it was like. And it was a higher stage. It was about a 4 foot high stage. So
so I
I,
was
I had a kind of a high perch, and I was looking down at the whole proceedings, and it was just it was like watching a live western. I remember thinking that, like,
so
saloons.
the main door to that room was opposite the stage. In fact, when you walk through that main door, I could look right at you and see you on stage.
I don't
That's
remember that, but I remember it was like a squarish type.
anyways, that
Bar
night
was
we were
over here, right? The left
yeah,
hand side.
over on the side. So we were sitting back by the door. And I can't that night when that fight broke out. I remember you talking about it on a live cut from your live show that you played at Eddie's in
Right.
82, 1982. You quoted this and you talked about the fight. Well, we saw the fight break out in the back of the bar, right?
What was it
Um,
all?
so so there's two guys and some chick over at a pool table. I remember this just like it was yesterday. And there's a fight, there's an argument that ensues. These two guys are yelling and screaming at each other. And I don't know what the hell is going on. I don't know if they're fighting over the girl or fighting over the pool game or both. I'm not sure. But anyway, doesn't the guy on the far side of the pool table pick a pool ball up and hucks it towards the other guy whose back is towards the bar, right? Well, second buddy ducks, and some chick walks by heading towards the bar, and the pool ball, bing, right off the head. And she went down. And then it was a massive fight from there. It just, all hell just broke
I
loose in that
when
place.
we played in Tilsonburg at the Royal. Remember the Royal?
The Royal Hotel in Tilsonburg, yeah.
It was against the law not to smoke in that bar. Anyway, middle tobacco country, Tilsonburg, the scariest word I ever heard. My back still hurts when I hear that word.
That's
Uh,
right.
not stop and tell. Anyway, we
Some,
used to play
some.
there. No kidding. It'd be so smoky that you had like I'd come home and Linda would have to take my clothes and wash them, right?
Because it
But we
smelled
were
like,
playing there one night. We were playing there one night. This just before we got signed. We used to be really good there, Paco as well. And we used to have this thing, disco sucks. And we go, everybody, the count of three, one, and we yell up, yell, disco sucks shit, right? And so we go, 1, 2, 3, and everybody stood up, and a beer bottle came sailing out and caught me right in the side of the head, like there. And I went down like a bag of
oh
shit.
my God.
And, because and the crowd started to chant, kill him, or whatever, right? Not me. They meant the guy that threw the beer bottle, right?
Right, for
But
sure.
because everybody was looking forward, nobody knew, I don't think, who threw it. But
Oh,
it's a good
wow.
thing because they would have killed that mother. They could, just like they did with when Frank Soda. You know, I just interviewed Frank Soda for this book too, and Frank and I are good friends now. And I remember when Frank Soda did the thing where he had the TV on his head, and somebody threw a beer ball through the screen of the TV. I think it was up at Barrymore's in Ottawa, and the bouncers and some of the crowd took that guy out in the alley, and they nearly beat him to death.
Oh,
Like,
man.
you know,
So there used to be always some crazy stuff going on in the audience. It's not, it didn't just happen in the bar scene. I've seen it happen at concerts. A couple of people getting in an argument in the middle of the crowd and they duke it out and nobody ever even sees it. Because buddy's down on the ground before you can count to two. It's
yeah,
it, it's crazy how that stuff breaks out and it usually has nothing to do with the music, but the worst case scenario is if the band gets hurt. I mean, that's just not right.
yeah. Or when the band's fighting.
Yeah. Andy Christ is online.
And
He
in those
says,
cases too, right?
Andy
Yeah.
Chris says, "Hey Brian, enjoying the chat. Looking forward to Maple Ridge next weekend. Are you going to have time on Sunday to drop by the zoo for a visit?"
Up by where?
The zoo.
Where's the zoo?
I don't know. He says you're going to drop by the zoo for a visit. This is Andy Christ.
When's this?
I don't know. He says he's looking forward to the Maple Ridge show next weekend. And he says,
What?
"Are you going to have time on Sunday to drop by the zoo for a visit?"
No. What's the zoo though?
I have no idea what the zoo is. So that's the
We,
question.
we leave at 6 o'clock in the morning Sunday
To head back home.
to head fly home. We're home by 2 o'clock in the afternoon to London.
That's an early morning after a late night.
Well, when I book flights, there's a lot of things I take into consideration. A, is it a direct flight? B, what's the price? And C, what's the time? D, what time do I have to get in? I had to book several different flights. As you know, Fritz isn't playing the rest of the year, so we got Jamie in there. So I had to change all the flights up. And then I had Jamie couldn't get on the same flight as us, for instance, between Cranbrook and Vancouver. So I'm in getting him a later flight from 9:30, which got him in at 1:30. You follow me? And I thought, no
Wow.
problem. We're playing later on the day, right? Well, then I get the itinerary. It's 1 hour from the airport to the hotel, and then another 15, 20 minutes to the where we're playing. So figure an hour, well, at least 2 hours probably once we leave the airport, land to get there. That's if the flight lands in time and everything, right? And then I noticed we're on at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, something like that, right? So there was only like a 2.5 hour window. It was too tight, so I had to book another flight for Jamie. So now poor Jamie is leaving Cranbrook at like I think 5:15 in the morning, which means he has to be up probably around 3:30 in the morning to get to the
Wow.
airport. Blah 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 blah. But
That's a
those things happen all the time, and those are the type of things we're dealing with when we book flights and these side times. It's not always as simple as, oh, we want to get in this time. It's a matter of many different factors of when I book the flights.
so you've got when you're doing these big shows, you've got an awful lot on your mind. I mean, you're planning an itinerary, you're getting everybody together, you're getting all the flights organized and making sure everybody's where they should be.
Well, first off, you have to advance all the shows. So that means that my sound man, who's Neil Fensky, he has to contact all the production people from all the festivals. So there'll be a production person in Cranbrook, be another production person in Vancouver. That's just that one weekend, right? So
Right.
then he will contact them, and I also CC. There's a head guy for all their stuff, right? That I CC in on all the emails, and then once they get they contact and they meet up, then they go over the back line and make sure it's all right. That everything's going to, according to what it's supposed to be. The gear is there for everybody, and then I go and I contact the hotel and send them a rooming list. Make sure that everybody's got in the right room and stuff. Then they assign room numbers. And lastly, I have to, well, actually not lastly, but then I have to contact whoever the runner is, transportation, shuttle service. And, each concert will have a shuttle service. So you have to send all the flight times in. So in the case of going out, okay, like first off, you got to get your flight times when you arrive in Cranbrook, okay, and they'll take you to the hotel. And then the next day, you're gonna have to figure out when you're leaving the hotel to go to sound check. When you're leaving sound check, go back to the hotel to get your stuff. When you're leaving the hotel to go back to play, and when you're leaving after the show to go back, and then when you're leaving in the morning, okay. And when you're leaving in the morning, there's 3 different flights, right? And then
It's
you
a
get
lot. There's a lot of logistics involved here.
3 more different flights when everybody leaves. So
How
uh,
how do you how do you how do you deal with all of that and then still, put on a great show? Like you got all that stuff on your shoulders, right? Trying to get that all sorted out. And then you're going to go and play the show and you're going to sing that show like you never sang it before. Because that's the way
well,
you work.
that's one of my strong points is being able to organize this stuff. I do it myself because like people don't realize it, but if you hire a road manager, you hire this person, that person on this level, by the end of the day, there's no money left. So you have to
Right.
do a lot of these jobs yourself that, back in the 80s, maybe, I had a manager, I had a road manager, I had 5 secretaries at the office. We had like a 4-man road crew and some guy that drove, and all those people are gone. I have like a sound man, and I got Randy out there helping with merch and just carry stuff and that, right? But other than that, that's it.
You're running
Travel.
lean. You're running lean, and you're still,
I
able
mean,
to pull it off, man. And when you get on stage, and sing, how much of that is a release of all that tension?
well, I don't know if it's a release of the tension, but I definitely go on stage thinking that I'm so lucky to still be doing this. And
Right.
so I try to enjoy every minute of it that I'm on stage.
And you don't just feel lucky that you're doing it, like, you're actually grateful that you're still doing it.
I'm very grateful I'm still doing it. A lot of singers don't have a voice left, or the band doesn't, never sold enough units or whatever. Or they never
Right.
got that far in their career that they can play gigs like this. We're still living the life of rock stars. We go out there and, we get treated very well. We stay at nice
Okay, here we go. Here we go. Brent's online, and he says, Brian V, the merchandise king. Oh
Well,
man.
that's part of it. I started in merchandise because when I lived at home on my parents' farm, I used to sell Christmas cards. And if you want a hard job, it's selling Christmas cards when you live on a farm, because there's like, a mile between houses, right? It's not like when you live on one block in the city, there's like 20 houses in each block. So I'd be going in laneways, and I'd have like German shepherds chasing me, nipping at my heels, and being threatened by dogs and stuff. And
Oh man.
but I always loved selling stuff. And when we finally went on the road, we didn't make much money. We started off at $40 a week, and I think it was a long time before we worked our way up to $100. And I used to sell initially T-shirts with Ranch and Roll on them, and then when we finally recorded our first 2 albums and I sold those albums, I think we, between the little distribution company we were with and selling them off stage, we sold 15,000 units, and that helped us get signed to Capital EMI in 1983. But we
Right.
used
And
to
you
go.
you got some really cool merch too.
Pardon?
I said you have really cool merchandise as well.
Well, we try to do it. Sometimes after we do it, I look back, go, geez, I wish we would have done that better. But that's part of it, I guess. We have the the Brian Vollmer Rocky doll. I think I got one behind me somewhere. I did have one around here somewhere. I must have moved it. But I just sold, oh, here it is. There you go. This is mine. This is the very first one. It's the prototype. Can you see that?
That's come a long
Does
way.
it look like me?
It
And this
looks
is
like
with
you
a
do.
3D printer. Well, this is it. This is Brian Vollmer, and I approve this message.
My God. You I don't know. That is a cool marketing gimmick. I love it, man. It's great.
Well, the hardest thing has been getting the recording devices from China,
Right?
because Jay helped me put this together, Jay Panasico. He contacted somebody in China, and he was able to get some that actually, if you look at the back here, let's see this once again, right? But at the back of it, there's that
Right.
little plug in there. You could actually recharge it by plugging it into the computer. But they sold us 3 for $15 each. And they said if we wanted any more, we had to buy 500 minimum at like 350 US or something. I went, no, it's okay. So now we got different ones coming in. So we're actually, the box behind is going to look really cool because it's going to look like an amp now.
Right.
It runs on batteries instead of being plugged in something, which actually I think is better.
So
Um,
how
I,
many
I,
how many of the prototypes did you buy?
there was only three because could only get three. What do you call it when the samples? We only get
Right.
three samples, and after that we couldn't get any more, right? So we couldn't get the recording devices. But what I was thinking is, I'm going to buy 100 now of these other ones, I think, and we might have several different things because next year being the 50th, we could make like a female figurine, for instance, right, and have her be singing "Heavy Metal Love," maybe.
So
You know?
we're actually thinking about a potentially a local show next year for to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Helix.
Well, I'd like to do several shows next year. It depends. Right now, I'm waiting to see how the Walkerville show in Windsor does on September
Right.
29th, and then our hometown show at Maxwell's on the 30th of September. If you're hearing this, fans, please come out to those two shows. Those are shows I'm doing myself. What that means is that I'm the guy renting the hall because I get sick of waiting for agents, promoters to phone me. So that's
Right.
screw it. I'll do it myself, right? And see if we can't run our own show and make some money. And
I think that next year, like for your 50th, maybe Caesars and Windsor should bring you down to Windsor to do a show.
well, that'd be nice. A lot of it has to do with who the agent is booking the room. So
Right.
there's a lot of politics sometimes going to some of these places.
Right.
Uh, but I
It'd be
know
cool.
I want to sing more because now I'm getting a little bit, I'm 68 now, and I want to be using my instruments, like use it or lose it, right? So I
Right.
want to be singing a bit more than I am,
Right.
just to keep my instrument in shape.
Right.
And
Maybe we could do some online polling and see if we think that we get a lot of people to come out to a show if we did a show at the London Music Hall.
well, I don't even know how much it is to rent there, right? But there
Right.
are other halls too in town we could try.
Well, here you are, corporate sponsors. Here's an opportunity for you to jump on board and sponsor Helix to come to the London Music Hall. I mean, that would be really cool if we could find a corporate sponsor to take care of that business.
Yeah, part of this for me is going through the process of learning how to do my own shows and getting back to the book, The Golden Age of the Canadian Bar Circuit, once again. In many ways, it's the music scene's reverting back to what it was in 1965 when it was one-nighters promoted by the
Right.
actors themselves. It's coming around to that because there was no
Right.
bar circuit once again. That's where we learned our craft, earned our spurs, and learn how to be performers and sing every night and have that sustainability that we didn't burn out after two nights. You need that stuff in order to prepare yourself, even as a person, for what is to follow. If you
Oh,
do as
definitely.
success, right? That's why some of these people they just they short circuit as soon as they get fame. They're not prepared for it. We built very slowly into that, that being recognized, that whole thing, right? It wasn't like one day, you know. Um, so you just keep going forward and doing your thing, and
Yeah, so there's a lot of cool stuff that we're going to be looking at in the next little while. We've got, like I said, the White Lace and Black Leather album that's out on TUNZ Records. It's on our website. We're going to be publishing that album digitally. That's going to go worldwide. And we're also going to be adding some bonus tracks in there. But we're going to be we talked about releasing a couple of singles, one of them being Women, Whiskey, and Sin, I believe.
Women Skin Sin was a big hit for us in the UK and was the number one import back in 1981 when that album came out. And that got us the attention of David Muntz, who worked for Capital EMI, and Munzy knew Dean Cameron, who was the president of Capital Records in Canada. So Munzy knew that there was a wave of metal coming. There was AC/DC and Judas Priest and Iron Maiden, all these bands coming out of the UK and out of Europe in general. And they thought that we were going to be the Canadian metal act. And we did end up becoming the metal act that represented Canada. Of all the metal acts in Canada at the time, we were the only one that was, internationally successful.
Right.
Other bands
There's
played outside the country, but we were the only band that really got outside the country eventually and sold units. And we were right across the country. We played from Atlantic to Pacific. No other metal band in Canada did that. And so I'm not ashamed to say that, and maybe beat my chest a little bit because it always seems like whenever they mention music in Canada, Helix for some reason never gets mentioned. I've seen things in Maclean's magazine, for instance, talking about the greatest Canadian bands of the '80s, and they got like I will mention some of these bands that you hardly even heard of, and no Helix. So I always stand up for my band, my players, and
that
for
it.
the legacy that is Helix. You know, don't need to get into a list of accomplishments, but like we've had quite a few in our career.
Gold albums, platinum albums, yeah. Why? Yeah, definitely. You guys have got the awards to show the hard work that you guys put into your craft. Um, there's a couple of things a burning question I have for you. So, Breaking Loose comes out on white lace and black leather, but the album Breaking Loose was your first album. So, what was the strategy behind not putting Breaking Loose as a title track on the first album?
Drugs. No, it's pretty simple. It was the most direct answer you could think of. Is that we wrote the song after the album was released.
Oh, okay.
Simple as that.
So
Same, same with
somebody decides afterwards we're gonna do that, and the thing is that White Lace and Black Leather is another song that comes out later as well.
yeah, but then we got it right at No Rest the Wicked.
Yeah, I mean that's just crazy how that developed, and the title track for the first album comes out on the second album. I really think it'd be really cool because I like how the artwork was done in White Lace and Black Leather and Breaking Loose, and I think that should be like a double LP set.
Well, that's actually idea. You put out a gatefold album.
Yeah, and have that in a gatefold album with some of the old photographs and maybe some shots from your scrapbook. I mean, that would be so flicking cool and a great collector's item for any diehard Helix fan because those first two albums, I love every song on those first two albums.
Well, they show the band trying to search for our sound at that point of our career, and it also shows a bit of how can I say it? Not sweetness, but naivety, or help me out here, Ken.
Did you? I mean,
I
did you
mean,
have?
we were young, right? We were basically,
Yeah, you're young and naive. I mean,
naive and we're, we just were trying to write songs. Back then it was different too. I think you could be more eclectic when you wrote. Nowadays it seems like you have to be in that slot, like you're this band or you're that band. But
right.
back then, because we had to go into bars and appeal to a large demographic of people in a large country called Canada, you had to go
Right.
over Young Street just like you went over in, I don't know, Grand Prairie, Alberta.
So when you guys first started recording music, how strong was the desire for you guys to record, to release music and get it out there?
I don't know about anybody else, but for me, it was really strong. For Paul, it was really strong. I remember one week we were down at playing the Norfolk Hotel in Simcoe, and everybody else screwed off. They were all partying and stuff, and me and Paul stayed there and wrote all week long. And we were just determined to write songs. And Brent was in there too. Um, and it's like anything else. The amount of hours you put into it, that's how good you get at it. And the three major writers turned out to be me, Brent, and Paul.
There's that old saying, it takes you 10 years to write your first album and then 1 year to write your next. But you guys wrote two really great albums back to back, and they if you listen to every single song on there, there's a couple of different directions this band could have gone based on the music on those albums.
Yes, we're heavily influenced by different bands like Brent and Brian Gerner were very much into progressive type of rock, Crack the Sky, Cat and Beyond, bands like that.
King
Whereas
Crimson,
pardon?
King Crimson.
King Crimson, there was another one.
Yeah.
Whereas Paul and I, we were straight ahead rockers. Paul was heavily into Deep Purple. And so was I. I was in Steppenwolf, Guess Who, a lot of Canadian bands, but more rock and roll stuff. Joe Cocker. And eventually, Paul and I went out. We were more of the straight ahead rock.
Yeah, and it really did influence your not only your writing style, but the direction that the band took after those first two albums. I mean, it's really cool, and like I said, those two albums, I believe, stand alone as a testament to a time period when Helix was figuring out, you know, directionally which way they were going to go with their music.
The breakthrough song for us, where we changed direction, where we found our sound, rather, I should say, is when Paul and I wrote "Check Out the Love," and we wrote that down at the Bronx, down in New York, and everybody agreed. They went, "Yeah, that's the sound. That's the sound we're looking for." And after that, we were just shooting out songs. We wrote White Lace and Black Leather. We wrote Heavy Metal Love, Dirty Dog. We were just spitting them out left and right and center. It was like we were writing 2, 3 songs a week. I Never Want to Lose You, No High Like Rock and Roll. And those influences are still with us today. I remember seeing an interview with Lemmy, and they asked him who was influencing him today. And he said, well, you never really lose your early influences, those first bands you listen to. You might listen to different stuff later on in life and get ideas for writing that, but essentially you never lose the influences of those first bands. And
Right.
same, yeah.
You guys, those, like I said, those albums to me, stand as a testament to that time period, in the band's history. That second album to me, in some ways, is a follow up to the first album. When you've got the title track from the first album actually on the second album, and other songs that got you guys noticed by major record labels. So some cool stuff that happened out of all of that time. And when you have that passion about recording, that passion that you guys had about recording and getting your music out there, 10 years to write that first album, that second album that came on the heels of that, and then of course you guys getting signed after those first two albums. So pretty cool. And
That's the
and they
reason I say that you spend your whole career writing your first album is because of or second album rather, is that when you write your first album, if you're not listening to any new music, guess what? You use all your ideas on your first album. And the second album is kind of like a little bit like the first. On the third album, you're searching for shit. That's why you should always be listening to new music and learning new stuff.
Yeah, and musical ideas come from things. I mean, we know there's like only 7 notes when it comes to making music, but the way you use those 7 notes and the order you use them and the way you change things up, where you put the hook in the song, right?
And not only that, your perception of the world around you. That's why everybody has a unique way of looking at the world. You are just a prism for everything you're seeing around you, and it's the way you get
Yeah.
it into a song. There's a million gazillion rock songs. So on one hand, you could say, "Oh, it's really easy to write a rock song." On the other hand, it's very difficult to write a rock song that hasn't been written before. That's really hard.
Yeah, there's a lot of them out there, and I remember one DJ saying to me, you know, when the band sends me a track to play, or you know, a label sends me a track to play, or whoever sends it to me, I listen to it, and if I don't get a hook within the first 30 seconds, I'm done.
Correct.
So it's hard to write a really good song that hooks those people that are actually going to play your music.
That's
It,
why I like writing the chorus and working backwards from the chorus, because if you don't have the chorus, what's the use of writing the rest of the song?
yeah, there's a skill. There's definitely a skill to it. I mean, and again, um, different genres of music have different formulas in the way that writers approach their methodology for writing. Rock music has its own
That may be
formula.
true, that may be true, but most professional writers have a certain way, though, to go about the whole writing process, and they
Right,
have a universal way of perceiving it.
right,
I, for instance, most professional songwriters, when it comes to lyrics, will get a melody that they like, and then they'll write lyrics to the melody without changing the melody. Beginning
right,
writers will try to ram as many lyrics as they can into a line, trying to look intelligent, but then it becomes vocal gymnastics for the singer. It doesn't feel natural, right? So when I walk into a song, first off, whenever I go into any writing session with someone, I don't wish for anything to come out of it except to have a good time,
right,
because I don't want to put any pressure on myself or with the person I'm writing with to come up with something. I think that's forcing it. You
right,
like when you're writing, you aren't the instigator of creativity. You're only a lightning rod. Creativity flows through you.
right,
So if you're really uptight when you're writing that, you close off those portals, let's say, that allow you to receive that gift of creativity. Whether it's a simple rock song or whatever, it's still creativity. So I try just to relax and have a good time. And there's certain things I do to, even when you don't feel creative, like that's another thing uncreative people uh, think about creative people, that, you have to be in this mood and that creativity is going to strike you as a lightning rod. But most
right,
professional writers don't work like that. They have ways of getting those creative juices flowing. They sit down, and there's just ways of, for instance, they'll take a sheet of paper and they'll write down a couple choruses that they believe in, and then just write down, say, every word they know that's associated with that title. And then they'll start working on a chorus. But um, I never try to be a motivation killer when somebody brings up an idea at a practice, because you never know where that idea is going to lead. Once again,
sure,
it's not you. You're just channeling something. Now, you may say, well, Eric Clapton seems to be channeling a lot better than you or whatever. But I think that musicianship and your understanding of music and how much you submerge yourself into music determines how good of a lightning rod you are. Like somebody that does music 7 days a week, 24/7, right? Like they're obviously going to be more of a lightning rod than someone that picks up a guitar like once every 2 years.
right.
So
There's an inspiration that comes from having your brain stimulated too, right? I mean, there's that whole um, neuro part of it as well, how you brain processes things. So the more you stimulate yourself with music, like you said, if you're not always listening to music, then it's going to be hard to be creative.
that's right. And everyone has their own perception of a certain event. You can see something and write a song, and I can see the same thing, write a song with two totally opposite songs with two totally opposite emotions. That's what's
Right,
great about being a songwriter, and why you don't have to worry about being like other people, because you perceive the world from your point of view. And that's, if you just write like that, you shouldn't clash with anybody else, let's say.
right.
But it's a muscle to be worked like anything else. Like this week, I wrote two different songs with two different groups of people. So even at 68, and it doesn't look like there's much hope of making money at this thing, writing songs, I still do it because you know why? Because I love doing it, and that should be your main motivation when you create music. Nothing,
Going through the
nothing
process.
pisses me off more when I hear somebody whine and go, "Oh yeah, I could do this thing more." It's like it's such a bummer out there, man. And blah blah blah. You know what I mean? I go, okay, well, move over then.
You're, the thing is that with songwriting too, you don't have to follow a specific formula anymore. You have a little more freedom. You're not working specifically for a record label. You're working for yourself and for your fans. You're trying to write music that you like and music that your fans like. And you've got your solo stuff you're working on as well as, continuing the Helix legacy.
Well, I have
Um,
to laugh when I hear this term formula. What exactly does that mean?
right.
Like, if you look at any music on the radio or music anywhere, most music is three sections: A, B, and C.
Yep.
Very few songs are like Bohemian Rhapsody, where you have like five, six different parts.
Yeah. Yeah.
You just
Like a
don't see
rock opera.
it's more common to see something like Stone Temple Pilots where they get three catchy parts and then they just keep interchanging the parts all the way through the song, or maybe adding a few lines or something to each part to make them a little bit different than when they used them the time before. But that's
Right.
usually how writers do it. And
Right.
usually, like I said, writers don't try to ram lyrics into the melody line. They get a
Right.
melody line that's catchy, and then they try to hear what the melody line is saying to them.
Right.
For instance, Yesterday, written by Paul McCartney, the original title was Ham and Eggs. Ham and eggs, da 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 da, ham and eggs. Because Paul McCartney knew instinctively as a writer that that was the melody he wanted to use. And if you look at the word ham and eggs, yesterday, it's got the same rhyming scheme. If you put different vowels on those notes, it wouldn't sound right.
Oh man, listen, this is the songwriting process is something we could definitely talk about some evening because you have a methodology that you use when it comes to writing music, and
Well, I think that's the way most writers write, though. If you
right,
read about most writers and the way they write, like most writers write like that. Like there's always exceptions to write. There's no set way to write. Roy
right.
Orbison used to write. He used to just, he'd write and you know what I mean? I can't turn in here.
I
Uh,
write, but I'm unorthodox. I'm as
Roy
unorthodox as
Orbison,
they come.
right? Roy Orbison, like some of his songs are kind of like that. They just kind of
Right,
wander, but it worked for Roy Orbison. So
for sure.
there is no set way of doing it. But I've worked hard at being a songwriter, and
Definitely.
I've
We're
kept it
past
up.
the we're past the top of the hour now. We didn't get to some of the subjects I'd hope we get to tonight. We were going to talk a little bit about you were talking about at the last show. We talked a little bit about things like royalties and how royalties worked and how you learned how royalties worked. That was an interesting conversation to be had because a lot of people don't understand out there in layman's terms or even in professional terms what royalties mean and how royalties can get collected for you or not collected for you, which is never a good thing. So we should maybe talk about that stuff next time we get together with this guy, Brian Vollmer.
That's a whole show right there.
That's right, Brian Vollmer. There he is. No, 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 no. There he is. There he is. There. That's Brian Vollmer. I'm Kenny, and you're not. This has been the Indie Show. We'll see you next time around. Good night, Brian. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Ken, and I'll see you on Friday night in my backyard for a
I
barbecue.
will definitely see you on Friday night. Cheers, brother.